This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing tonight? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. On this last Sunday in March, we made it. Oh my gosh, that went fast. And spring is springing around here. Am I right, Rob? Rob Barrett's my engineer on the other side of the glass. Speaking of spring, we have lots of inspiration for you tonight. And we begin with Ken Norris. Diagnosed with post-polio syndrome, a condition that afflicts polio survivors decades after they battled polio. Many suffer motor neuron loss and muscle atrophy. And when doctors told Ken he had to take early retirement from his job as a textbook illustrator, he went into a deep depression. Through writing this book, though, about a man overcoming insurmountable odds, Ken has pulled through. And the name of his book is entitled Coal of the Heart. Ken, in your book, your main character retreats into the woods, leaves his loved ones, and joins a group of misfits. How does this story reflect your real-life battle?
Well, I don't think it's fiction, but it does illustrate how it felt as far as, I kept thinking, well, this sounds like, whining or whatever, but I thought, this is everybody as you get older. No matter what industry you're in, the technology passes you by. Not only that, but not everybody is concerned with the future. And what it does, you're pretty much you're afraid of the future. And there's some folks are just above this, like the CEOs of companies or whatever. So for the majority of the others, of the employees, they have to fend for themselves. And I think we all realize that we're not completely in control of our future. And I think that's what he feels like he's been a victim of the downsizing and all that,
Was your job replaced by technology?
Well, yeah, I was a book illustrator for 26 years, and they went to other means of for teaching aids. It was like the simulators they have that, or airline pilots and all that sort of stuff. And the same thing for doctors, for optometry, pretty much it. Plus, overall, I was having the post-polio syndrome. It's a progressive thing where you just get weaker. And so 8 hours a day and all, all the doctors were suggested that I take an early retirement.
This book helped you realize some of the things you were dealing with and inspired you to get help.
Yes.
All right. Well,
and so what I did was I came up with a situation, an impossible situation, and I wondered how would I cope with it. And so the solution I came up with in the story is the best way for the hero of the story to survive. There was no other option, and so the question was that I asked myself, how would you deal with a situation like this? It's like the old man in the sea meets Cujo.
Okay, Ken. Old Man in the Sea meets Cujo. Gigi Riggs loved Peter Pan and The Wizard of Oz growing up, and she loves time traveling and The Outlanders as an adult. Now, she's written, well, I'll let Gigi tell you. Gigi, how you doing?
I am fine, Allison. I've been excited to hear, so I just almost jumped on my cell phone.
That excited to talk about the Fookie Shack.
Yes, I am excited to talk about it. It's my first work to ever have it published, and it really was a thrill. It was a thrill.
It's a Fookie Shack, a beach adventure.
It is. I named it that because my little granddaughters couldn't say the word spooky when they were little, so they'd say, "Oh, that is so spooky, Grandma." The beach thing came up because our family travels together and goes to Port Aransas almost every year in June for a family reunion. And we stay in Port Aransas at this wonderful place that I've renamed in my story. And there actually was a room that we stayed in one of the summers that had strange things that happened in the room. And my brain, I've always had a very vivid imagination. And so my brain started putting a story together. There were shells that would move on the wall when there was no wind blowing by them. At night, my daughter said she thought she felt someone sit down on the bed beside her, but there was nobody there. And so there were all kinds of strange little things. The lights were on when we knew we had turned them all off. So that sort of began a story about something spooky that was going on in the room. And then it went on from there to develop into something else. It's about a little boy who fell from the balcony of that particular room, and now this is all made up, and fell to his death. But you witnessed the little boy's death through his eyes, and it wasn't a terrible thing for him because he was held up by angels, and his little spirit was trapped in that room. And so that's what the family begins to try and decipher through help of different clues that are left all around by a bunch of birds that are watching them from the rooftop of what they begin to call the Spooky Shack, because there's a little shack in front of the motel that looks like it's abandoned, and that's where all these little seagulls accumulate on the roof line, looking at the people that are in the room staying, and they can look in their balcony window. So the family begins to put things together and figure out what's going on, and the moral of the story is the mother that loses this little boy is heartbroken, of course, and my family finds her in this nursing facility in Corpus Christi, and they put the whole thing together, and they're able to reunite the spirit of the little boy with the mom. Everything ends very happily, of course. I would want it to end that way, but it's just a series of things that have to be put together to have the family figure out what's going on.
Are you going to write some more?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've got Return to Spooky Shack, and it's a totally different story, but it takes place in basically the same place. It has to do with the Day of the Dead. It's a totally different thing, but it involves time travel, and my littlest granddaughter is the one that it happens to, and she travels to the cemetery and meets her grandfather that she has never known. Yes, I'm just getting ready to put it on my computer as we speak.
Well, Gigi, I'll tell you, your passion is intoxicating. I have no doubt I'll be talking to you again soon. Clarence Vald grew up on a farm in South Dakota and spent 30 years in the Air Force, and what's interesting about his book, entitled Farmer's Son, Military Career, is how he came to write it. Clarence.
Actually, it started that my brother died, and he had told his son the things he wanted in his obituary. And my wife says, why don't you make a few notes for an obituary for you? And I said, okay. So I started telling my story, writing it. First, I just wrote the story and added some pictures, and that didn't work out, so I took pictures from me growing up until as an adult, and then wrote the story around there. And finally, I ended up with a 322-page obituary. It's got a lot of pictures in there, but it tells about growing up on a farm. About 10 miles west of us, there was a little place called Bejo Hills, and the story is that somebody's coming across the plain, and somebody looked and says, "By Joe, look those hills," and it kind of evolved into Bejo Hills. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an interesting story. I went to school in a one-room schoolhouse, surviving blizzards, including getting lost in my own yard, and doing stupid things to myself, like shooting myself in the finger, sticking a needle through my finger. Shows my father. He's weary, he's tired, and I never actually verbalized it or thought about it, but it's just the idea of, I saw what farming did to him, and I didn't want that life for myself. I saw him working hard all his life and getting old before his time, and I didn't want that for me. And Brother Robert had gone to college, and he pretty much insisted that I go to college, and I started. Didn't work out, so 4 years in the Air Force, I'll figure out what I want to do. At the 4-year point, here's a chance to travel, so I go to Japan. At 8 years, it's, make or break, so I stayed in, and I worked hard and ended up with the highest enlisted grade.
So if there's one thing you want people to remember about you, what is it?
I served with pride. John Kennedy was my political inspiration. I remember seeing him in 1956 at the Democratic Convention. I didn't just answer his challenge to America. I lived it for 30 years.
Nice.
And I also say, well, My brother went served the hitch in the Army and then went to college and worked, and I served the hitch in the Air Force and went to college, but his hitch was 3 years, mine was 30.
Well, good for you. What do you do now?
Well, my wife died last month, and I'm in the process of moving to Washington, D.C., to the Armed Forces Retirement Home, and I'm going to keep writing. One short project. I'm not sure I'll have time to get it done when I wanted to, but I wanted to write a short book on remembering John Kennedy. And then I've got a couple ideas. One about the end of World War II, and I don't know if but maybe one about Vietnam.
All right, Clarence, keep writing. Brianna Bagshaw is a busy college student majoring in Christian studies, but she had this book she needed to get out to the world. It's called Last Believer Chronicles 1, Chosen Child. Brianna, you call this a Christian fantasy book that you wrote a while back, right?
Well, I actually started writing it when I was in high school, but my computer crashed and I lost my entire story. So after a short mourning period for my lost computer, I decided that I wasn't going to give up, and I just started writing it again.
Did you find when you rewrote it that it was even better than the first time?
Absolutely, because I took time and I was able to use the knowledge that I picked up while I was here at college, and that way I was able to make the book even better than it was before. And I used a group that I've been in for so long in college called Friends of the Pen, which actually is a creative writing group, and I bounced ideas off of them, and they helped me flesh out my story.
Well, when you were in high school, were you around someone who didn't believe?
It was more along the lines of, I had a dream one night, which is strange because I don't remember most of my dreams. So I had a dream one night where literally I saw this world that was devastated. It was covered in darkness and everything. I couldn't even understand where it was. And in the middle of this was this girl standing there with long silver hair and purple eyes. And I was just like, I don't know who this is. I don't know what's going on here. And then I heard a voice say, tell her story. I woke up, and next thing I know, I had this entire story in my head, and I just started going with it.
Do you find that, there's a lot of non-believers among young people?
I find that nowadays it's becoming more of a norm that people don't really believe in God. It's becoming more of a society standard to not believe rather than the society standard that was 50 years ago where everybody believed. And to me, it more has to do along with the lines of it's no longer an importance in our society. We don't consider faith the importance that it used to be. And to me, that can be a very deadly thing. More along the lines of I want to get out the message that believing is this entire journey of a person. I mean, the entire book is about this girl who finds God in this world that doesn't believe in him. So it's both a message of faith is something that you have to fight for, and it's also no matter where you are or who you are or what you've done, God accepts everybody. So sort of just speaking not just to the Christians out there, but also to the non-Christians, to the non-believers, and saying, hey, look, I don't care who you are or what you've done. God still loves you and God still wants you. This is the beginning of a 7-series book. I hope I'm going to be able to get the next one out here pretty soon.
Great. Are you going to stick with Paige? Did you have a good experience?
Absolutely. I absolutely loved Paige. I will validate them. I will recommend them to everybody. All my writer friends are asking me, who would you go with? And I'm telling them all about how Paige Publishing is awesome. So I'm going to stick with Paige as far and as long as I can.
Good, Brianna. That's what we like to hear. All right, we are going to take a quick break. Coming up, a Valentine to New York City and fraternal twins who end up falling in love. That and so much more coming up right after this.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Paige Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Paige Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Paige Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Paige Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Our next author, Wayne Kangas, is on a mission, and he's hoping his book is one school districts cannot refuse. It's called Saved by Indigo, Part 1.
Well, it's a story about a young girl that is kind of lost in our society, and she's an orphan. And with the right help from her adopted father, she flourishes. She blooms like a flower. And I was a teacher, and I just figured up how many students I helped in my life, which only came to a few thousand. And I thought if I write this book, maybe I could help quite a bit more. And I put incentives in, like vocabulary lists at the back of each chapter and writing prompts at the end of the book, trying to get school districts to use it as like a class reader. And then I made the message pretty strong in it, telling how to succeed and how to succeed in school and how to succeed in training a dog and how to succeed in life.
But the book is mainly about a girl, about an orphan that you saved.
Yes, she's a Native American. I am a retired teacher, and this guy in the story is a retired teacher also. And isn't that a coincidence?
Yeah, how about that, huh? You got to write what you know, Wayne. Got to write what you know.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess the challenge for you is, could you go back to your school that you taught at? Would they use your book?
Oh, it's not about selling 30. It's about selling 3 million to me. I know it will sell, but it may take some time. It has a huge message in it, and a larger message than any book I've ever read. Because we did a lot of reading in class.
What's the larger message?
How to grow up and how to make good grades and how to make yourself happy by getting a lot of hobbies and how to train dogs. And it is a fiction, but a huge amount of it is real, and it's an excellent message for kids.
Okay, well, good luck getting it out there and getting it into schools. There's a lot of hurdles because schools have to go through.
Yes, I know they have to approve it and everything.
Yeah.
But if they didn't approve this book, they would be numb in the head. I'll tell you.
John Strange is a man who longs for the city he left, and he tells us why in his book entitled simply My 30 Years in New York City. Your book is about your 30 years in New York City, and you use all of these adjectives to describe each and every year that you spent in New York City.
Yes.
What makes your 30 years in New York City unique?
Everything about New York is magical. There's nothing about New York that isn't unique. I enjoyed every second I was there. Now that I'm not living there, the second my plane lands, I come alive. There's just a magic about New York.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of homesick, John.
Without question. I wish I had never moved. I really do. But things happen, and I ended up here in West Palm Beach.
What did you do here?
I moved to New York to be an actor. And it's not easy attempting acting when you're doing a 9-to-5 job every day, but I gave it my best shot.
What did you end up doing 9 to 5?
My big job was working on Wall Street for a stock brokerage. Yeah, I knew absolutely nothing about the stock brokerage business, but I started at the bottom of the totem pole and I worked my way up. And so that was my main big job. But I did that for about 15 years. But then I tried to focus on acting for a bit. But the thing about New York, if you go to an audition in New York, if you're number 1,300, that's normal. I mean, there's so many. The competition in New York is just unbelievable.
Out of all of the stories in this book, what would be the one you most want to share?
My initial move, going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, I went to drama school, and meeting Julie Andrews was exciting. She was a person I always admired so much.
Where did you meet her?
I was meeting a friend to go to the theater on 42nd Street, and I ran into her. I knew the gentleman that was her house manager, and he was just happened to be there in a Jeep, Blake Edwards, and he said, "John," I said, "Michael, what are you doing here?" He said, "Wait 5 minutes and you could meet Julie Andrews." And she came out of the studio. And that was the first time I met her. But then I went on to see quite a bit of her. I owned a house in the Hamptons my last 8 years, and she and Blake Edwards also lived and had a place in the Hamptons. And I was a big supporter of the Bay Street Theater out there. That her daughter, Emma Walton, was Sybil Burton, Richard's first wife. They put together the Bay Street Theater. They were the founders of that theater, and I supported them. And I would see Julie there, and she was just charming. She was everything you'd think she'd be. When I met Katharine Hepburn when I was in my 20s, that was exciting.
What's the one thing you want readers to come away with?
What a magical city New York is. It's one review that I received online. The reviewer said that this book was my Valentine to New York City, and I think that says it all.
Sure enough, John. Our next author, Thomas Valentine, was inspired by, well, eavesdropping, and his book, entitled Unintentionally Connected, is the result.
The story is about two fraternal twins, male and female, and as babies, they get separated due to a tragic accident. And what happens is the male baby is kidnapped, and the twins end up growing up in different areas, different cities. So the male twin, his name is changed, and they find each other later in life, and they fall in love with each other, unaware that they are twins. And then the story just goes on from there.
So they're a boy and a girl. They probably have a lot in common, right, when they meet?
Yes, they have a lot in common. And, you know, a lot of their features are alike, but by them being fraternal, you know, they don't really look alike, but their interests in things are pretty similar. So,
what made you go with this?
Well, I heard some people talking on the elevator at a hospital, and I caught a little bit of the conversation. From their conversation, you know, I came home and I started writing because, you know, I've never written a book before, and I said, let me try something, because this is very controversial. And I just started writing, and really I was looking into, you know, maybe a movie could come from this because it's so controversial. And I haven't seen anything out there like this. So that was my goal, you know.
Let me get this straight. You were on an elevator. You heard two people talking about this. You said, I'm going to go home and write this, and maybe, you know, something will come out of it. Like, just out of nowhere, you never wrote before.
You know, I love to write. I was never an English major or anything like that. I'm not the best writer. It's just the fact that I just like to write down thoughts because I have tons of things that I want to write about, you know. And this was just one of them. And I think it's controversial enough to where, you know, it may even hit the talk shows. You know, what if you find out that your spouse is probably a close relative that you didn't know about?
That's not a close relative. That's your brother or your sister.
Right, that's your brother. Well, yes. I mean, what do you do?
Well, you know, I think about when you have kids. That could not work out well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's in the book. I just see it on the big screen. Well,
all you need is a screenplay and a good friend and a good friend in the film industry.
Yes, that's the problem. But like I said, I'm looking for a screenwriter to help me get this out there and, you know, make some money and a legacy.
There you go. You go, Thomas. Our next author grew up in Greenville, Texas, a land he describes as one of broken dreams and broken promises. It's called The Tantalizing Tales of an Arctic Tiger by Joshua Arctic McCoy. What's with the Arctic nickname?
Yes, it's actually my screen name that I came up with after being very, very interested in Siberian tigers, and I thought of a different way to describe it other than just say Siberian.
So instead of Siberian, you call it an Arctic tiger.
Exactly right. And I adapted the name just because I thought it was unique.
So do they call you Arctic for short?
Yes.
What are these tales? Are these your personal experiences?
In a way, it's basically the different life experiences that I've gone through from childhood through my high school years and my teenage years. It incorporates all different kinds of genres, anywhere from romance to mystery to horror. I added a lot of different sensual elements to it as well. So it has a lot of different erotica pieces written through it. because erotica has been something that's been an interest in my life all throughout my years.
Is this a tantalizing tale of an Arctic tiger, and the Arctic tiger is you?
Oh, I actually had that question before. It's a book about me, and it's a book about the different experiences. It doesn't really have anything to do much with a real tiger, but the tale itself is kind of like a way of being able to wrap it around as a whole. Like, say, for example, if you had a whole bunch of balloons in a bag, the bag basically is the handle, the name of it, but what's inside is of different elements that are brought together that's created into a whole.
What's the takeaway here?
I want to leave readers with the mantra that let no dream go unrealized, and anyone has the power to change the world one mind at a time. Because it, for me, is a dream that I've always wanted to make come true. I've always wanted to share with the world the different experiences that I went through and be able to voice my opinions. But when I was growing up, I was raised that what I say doesn't matter. And in the town that I lived, it was kind of brought down upon you that you couldn't make a difference. And the fact that I was able to actually bring something to life and create it, I want to inspire hope within other people to do the same, to realize their dreams and whatever they want to accomplish in life is possible. And that the emotions that you go through, they're not the only ones that go through it. Like, it's a way to be able to relate how they feel to the same sadness that I had to go through and the things that I had to go through as well.
All right, Arctic. And that about wraps up this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. But before we go, I just want to give you, my Page Publishing Book Club faithful, a heads up. It's spring, and you know what that means. Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Yes, it's baseball time, and everybody here in New York, even, dare I say, Yankee fans, are really excited about this season. I mean, we made it all the way to the playoffs last year, and the team is determined for a World Series win this year. So please be patient and understanding if the Page Publishing Book Club has to be preempted because of a game. We will make it up to you, we promise. Last year, we had, I think, one, maybe two one-hour shows to make sure that we were able to bring you all the first-time authors who so deserve to be here. So if you tune in and you hear crowds cheering and a crack of the bat, don't despair. We're still here for you. For now, as far as I can tell, we will be back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Same time, same place, 710 WOR.